Wait, you don't think that you're good at interviewing people? Let's fix that.
Playing the Misfit Heroes podcast.
What up, Misfits? Welcome to the Misfit Heroes podcast. My name is Chris, and together we are going on a journey. Now, Misfits, I want to address something that I've received a lot of questions about while doing these videos about how to start a podcast. More than a few people that I've spoken to have told me that they either don't think they'd be a good interviewer or that they couldn't come up with things to talk about in an interesting way. Well, let's tackle those subjects head on. Here are 5 tips for how to make any interview interesting. First, if you're new here, welcome aboard the crazy train. I did a video earlier about how to listen better, and I've given plenty of tips to be a better podcaster. But this one is going to be a little bit different, and I'm going to give direct, usable ideas that I personally use to speak to someone. So, if you're feeling a little nervous about talking to someone, you are about to be enlightened. I'm going to start with what should seem like a simple idea right out of the gate. You need to be interested in whomever you're having a conversation with.
Duh.
This probably seems like a simple plan. I'm just a kid. But a lot of podcasters miss this right out of the gate. I clear every single person that asks to come on my show, and I get a lot of requests. Before I invite anyone on the show, I do a little bit of research on them. I check them out on social media, I Google them, and I often do a pre-interview screening so I can feel people out a little bit, especially if it's someone that I've never met or talked to before. You want to know why? Kanye West.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
This is a good segue into my second tip. You should make a list of questions to ask someone before you interview them. Checking people out online is a great plan of action to orient yourself.
Wait, why do I feel a butt coming on?
But while I'm doing that, I like to ask myself questions or think about topics that I'd like the guests to answer. So as I'm reading their book, if they're an author, or if I'm checking them out on social media, or if I'm listening to previous podcasts or content that they've made, I'm writing down questions that I think I'd like to hear their perspective on. And then, guess what I do?
Yeah, then what? What do you do?
Well, I give them a list of those questions, and I ask them if there's anything else that they'd like to discuss or add to that list. This helps the guests prepare for the interview, and it gets them comfortable with talking to me before I even meet them. And before anybody says this, I will beat them to the punch. Well, doesn't that make the conversation less organic or authentic? I'm going to be frank here. By the time I'm sitting down for an interview with someone, I'm already enthralled and prepared for the conversation fully. I've probably already consumed more of the guest's content than they have, and I've already got an idea of how the majority of a conversation is going to flow, and in which direction that it's going to go in general. This just makes it easy for someone to feel more comfortable and ready to speak more openly about certain topics. And in my experience, it makes things roll a little bit smoother.
Autobots, transform and roll!
Now, to be clear, I don't just send the guests questions and then ask those exact same questions word for word when I interview them. I like to relate some of the questions to a particular issue or some reasoning for me asking it. And then, when the guest responds, I like to use their response to expand upon that thought a little bit. We call these clarifying questions in the business.
It's a dangerous business, Frodo.
Now, you might be wondering how I get guests that I'm interested in repeatedly. Well, let me give you some insight. I'm going to change your mindset on this, and it's so much easier than you think. You just have to ask. It can be intimidating to message people, particularly if maybe they have a huge following, or they're a celebrity, or if they have some type of management. Literally, just ask. But when you do, make sure you ask in a way that would make someone want to respond to you. For example, tell them about how you found them and what piqued your interest, why you're contacting them, what your podcast is about, what they would receive in return, and why you think that they should speak to you. I mean, sell yourself. And look, if you get rejected, don't give up. There are plenty of people to talk to on any given subject, and you don't have to be some relationship expert to get to know people. Just reach out to every single person you want to speak to and use the shotgun approach. Trust me, you'll get someone. While we're on the subject, if you're having trouble finding guests, did you know that there are tons of sites out there that filled with people that want to be on podcasts? Here's some of my favorites: Reddit, Podmatch and Whova are all great networking sites that you may not have heard of, but they do a fantastic job of matching you with people that have similar interests or could be a good fit for your podcast. Think of it like speed dating, but for podcasts. It's not weird at all. Back to interviewing. If you haven't figured it out yet, my biggest tip for keeping interviews on point revolves around research. One thing I want to point out is that so many people think an interview happens in the time allotted that the guest schedules with you. But in reality, that's never the case. The majority of the work happens before I've ever even met or contacted the guest. This mentality also keeps conversations from drifting off topic or going off on too many tangents. Now, some listeners like that, and look, there's nothing wrong with friendly banter, but sometimes it can be a little bit too much and it can become distracting to your listener. I like to throw some jokes in there. I like to keep it light while keeping the overall topic of what you're discussing at hand. But don't overthink this. In reality, just have fun. I mean, probably the best advice I can give on interviewing someone is just to enjoy interviewing someone. This is kind of hard to explain, but if you just seem genuinely interested in what someone is saying, most of the time people will feel comfortable and just be more at ease about talking openly with you. The last tip I'd have for you is to treat every single conversation with someone as a way of building a relationship.
How you ladies doing? How are ya?
The more sympathetic and personable you are in speaking to someone usually leads to the guest being more inviting and wanting to help you more in return. I've had plenty of guests asked to do follow-up interviews and build a consistent relationship in not only podcasting, but also in collaborative ventures as well. So literally try and treat everyone as a friend, and you'll be surprised how many connections you'll have in no time. I hope these tips helped you out. Do me a favor. Let me know down below in the comments section if you learned something new at all, and if you feel like there's a question you have about podcasting or anything on this journey with me, type that too, and be sure to like and subscribe. I always love to hear reviews of the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you can follow me on any of the social medias down in the show notes below. Truly Misfits, I love you, and as always, be kind, love one another, and be a hero.